My name is Emma, I'm 24, and my parents told me I was adopted and would get nothing from their inheritance. Then, just when I'd accepted my fate, I got a call from my dead grandmother's lawyer about a $3.5 million surprise, and a letter that would expose every lie they'd ever told. Before I tell you about the moment I walked into their house with a smile on my face, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The phone buzzed against the grimy counter of the coffee shop, its vibration a stark contrast to the drone of the espresso machine and the low chatter of customers. It was an unknown number from a local area code. My policy, born from exhaustion and a deep-seated desire to be left alone, was simple: if I didn't recognize the number, I didn't answer. I was halfway through a grueling double shift, my apron was stained with a Jackson Pollock of coffee and syrup, and my feet were engaged in a screaming match with the cheap soles of my work shoes. I simply didn't have the energy for a telemarketer or a wrong number. But this time, for some reason I couldn't explain, I hesitated. My hand, slick with condensation from a cup I'd just filled, hovered over the decline button. Something, a faint whisper of intuition, told me to pick it up. With a sigh that felt like it came from the depths of my soul, I wiped my hand on my jeans and slid the green icon across the screen. "Is this Emma Caldwell?" a woman's voice inquired. It was crisp, clear, and carried a note of professional authority that made me instinctively stand up a little straighter, as if she could see me slumping against the counter. "Yes, this is she," I managed to say, trying to pitch my voice to sound less like a weary barista and more like a functional adult. "My name is Margaret Stevens. I'm an attorney, and I'm representing the estate of the late Eleanora Caldwell. I realize her funeral was 6 months ago, and I apologize for the delay, but some complex matters required time to settle. It's imperative that I schedule a meeting with you at your earliest convenience." My heart performed a strange, painful lurch in my chest. Eleanora. My grandma. The name alone was a ghost, a memory from a softer, kinder time. But the rest of the sentence was a discordant mess of confusion. I'm sorry, I think there must be a mistake," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "My parents were very, very clear with me. I wasn't included in my grandmother's will." The silence that followed on the other end of the line was brief, but it was so heavy it felt like a physical weight. "Ms. Caldwell," Margaret Stevens said, her tone softening just enough to convey empathy without losing its professional edge, "I can assure you, there is no mistake. What your parents told you and what is written in your grandmother's final, notarized testament are two vastly different things. Can you be at my office at 4 o'clock this afternoon?" I glanced at the clock on the wall, its red digital numbers mocking me. My shift didn't end until 6. I was supposed to be wiping down tables and restocking milk. But in that moment, the entire world seemed to have tilted on its axis, and the coffee shop felt like a cage. "Yes," I heard myself say, the word escaping before I had a chance to second-guess it. "I'll be there." The drive to the downtown law office was a journey through a minefield of memories. My beat-up 2008 Civic, with its check engine light a permanent feature of the dashboard, sputtered along as my mind spun. I was suddenly 10 years old again, at my half-sister Olivia's birthday party. The house was a kaleidoscope of pink balloons and shrieking children. I remember wanting so badly to join the game of musical chairs. But Patricia, the woman I was forced to call Mom, intercepted me as I made a move for the living room. She put a hand on my shoulder, her nails digging in just slightly. "Emma, honey, the dishes aren't going to wash themselves," she'd said with a smile that never reached her cold eyes. "Your place is helping out in the kitchen." I'd risked a glance at my father, Richard, who was standing by the fireplace. He saw my pleading look, I know he did. He just took a long sip of his beer and turned to talk to another parent, his back a wall of indifference. He was a champion of avoidance. The memory dissolved, replaced by another, sharper one. The last time I saw Grandma Eleanora, 6 years ago, just before the move that tore my world apart. She had hugged me on her front porch, a hug so fierce it felt like she was trying to pour all her love into me at once. Her signature lavender scent was a cloud of comfort. Don't you ever let them make you feel small, my girl, she whispered into my hair, her voice thick with an emotion I didn't understand at the time. You are precious, and don't you forget it. A week later, Patricia and Richard sat me down and announced we were moving 3 states away. It was a great career opportunity for Dad, a huge promotion, they'd said. I knew, even then, that it was a lie. It was an excuse to sever the last thread connecting me to the only person who looked at me like I mattered. My life since then had been a testament to their success. I was a ghost in my own family, a footnote in their story. Now, I was a ghost in my own life, haunting the linoleum floors of a coffee shop, working double shifts to scrape together enough money for my community college tuition. My salary was a joke, barely covering rent on my shoebox apartment and the gas for my dying car. There was no college fund waiting for me, no safety net. Just the bone-deep knowledge of what they had drilled into me, year after year: you are not one of us. You are adopted. You are lucky to have a roof over your head. When we die, you get nothing. Margaret Stevens's office was like stepping into another dimension. The air smelled of old books and success. Dark wood bookcases lined the walls, and the chair she offered me was made of soft, supple leather that probably cost more than my car. She didn't look at my worn-out jeans or my faded t-shirt with disdain. She looked at me with kindness. Thank you for coming on such short notice, Emma, she said, folding her hands on the vast, polished mahogany desk. I'll get straight to the point, as I'm sure you're anxious. Your grandmother was a very methodical and determined woman. She left behind a will that is, in no uncertain terms, ironclad. She slid a thick document bound in a blue cover across the desk. My eyes struggled to make sense of the dense legal text, but then they caught on a few key phrases and numbers, and the air physically left my lungs. To be precise, Margaret continued, her voice a calm anchor in my swirling confusion, your grandmother, Eleanor Caldwell, has left you the entirety of her residual estate. That includes her home on Oakhaven Road, all stocks and investment accounts held in her name, and a liquid inheritance of $3,542,000. I just stared at her, my mouth slightly agape. The words were English, but they didn't make sense. It was like trying to read a sentence with all the letters jumbled. 3 million? I whispered. It sounded like a number from a movie, not my life. This had to be a mistake, a cruel, twisted prank. But, my parents, they told me, they said I was cut out after a divorce, that she changed the will after her, after she and Grandpa split. I was grasping at the lies they'd told me, the flimsy stories I'd been fed. What your parents said was a fabrication, Margaret stated gently but firmly. Eleanor never removed you from her will. In fact, you were always the primary beneficiary. As for the others, your siblings, Marcus and Olivia, are to receive a one-time sum of $5,000 each. Your father, Richard, and his wife, Patricia, are to receive, and I quote, nothing but the consequences of their own actions. A dizzying, disorienting wave of vertigo washed over me. Nothing. They got nothing. All those years of being the perfect family, all for nothing. But that's not the most important thing she left you, Margaret said, her gaze intent. She opened a polished wooden box on her desk and retrieved a heavy, cream-colored envelope, sealed with a dark blue wax stamp bearing an E. She left you this. Her instructions were explicit, you were to be given this before any financial matters were discussed. She slid the envelope across the desk. It felt warm, almost alive, in my trembling hands. She told me this was the most valuable part of your inheritance, Margaret said softly. She said it contained the truth. My advice, Emma, is to go home. Read this in private. Let it sink in. And then, when you're ready, you can call me, and we will decide how you want to proceed. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the traffic or the route. I just remember the weight of the envelope on the passenger seat beside me. Back in my tiny, cluttered apartment, I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto my lumpy, second-hand couch. The envelope felt like a brick in my hands. This was it. The key to everything. The answer to the question that had haunted my entire life, why? With a deep, shuddering breath, I broke the wax seal. Inside, there were several pages of thick, expensive paper, covered in my grandmother's elegant, looping handwriting. My dearest Emma, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and it means that after all these years, the lies can finally come to an end. There is so much I have wanted to tell you, so much you deserve to know. Let me start with the most important truth of all, you are not adopted. I had to read the line 3, 4, 5 times. My brain simply couldn't process it. It was like trying to convince myself the sky was green. You are my granddaughter by blood and bone. You are the biological daughter of my son, Richard, and his first wife, a woman named Jennifer. Your real mother. Jennifer. A name I had never heard, a person I never knew existed. A ghost. She was the great love of your father's life, a brilliant, funny, vibrant woman who painted and loved to dance in the rain. She adored you more than life itself. She died in a horrific car accident when you were just 2 years old. Your father was shattered, a hollowed-out version of the man he once was. And then, 6 months later, still lost in his grief, he met Patricia. From the very beginning, Patricia saw you not as a grieving child to be loved, but as a constant, breathing reminder of the woman who came before her. You were an obstacle to her perfect family. When she and your father married, she told him she wanted a completely fresh start. And that meant getting rid of you. She wanted to give you up for adoption, to send you away to strangers. A hot, rancid bile rose in my throat. I felt sick. I fought her, Emma. I swear to you, I fought like a lioness. I told your father that if he dared to sign those papers, I would take him to court for full custody, and I would use every penny I had to win. I would not lose you. He was weak, and he finally relented. But that was the day Patricia declared her silent, vicious war against you. She spent the next 20 years poisoning your father's mind, convincing him to treat you as less than, to push you to the absolute margins of the family, to build a wall between you and me, brick by painful brick. The move across the state wasn't for a promotion, my love. It was to sever our connection completely. But even she couldn't stop me from loving you. She couldn't stop me from watching over you. The letter detailed everything. How she'd hired a private investigator to send her updates. She knew about my struggles in school, the bullying I never told anyone about. She knew when my car broke down, when I had to take on a second job. She knew Patricia and Richard had intercepted a college fund she had tried to set up for me years ago, claiming they would manage it before spending it on a family vacation to Hawaii, a vacation I wasn't invited on. Every sentence was a new layer of betrayal, but also a strange, painful validation. I hadn't been imagining it. I wasn't crazy. Someone had seen. Someone had known. I finally fell into a fitful sleep on the couch, the letter clutched to my chest, my face stiff with dried tears. It was a sleep haunted by phantoms, the smiling face of a mother I'd never met, the fierce love of a grandmother who fought for me from beyond the grave, and the hollowed-out faces of the two people who had built my life on a foundation of lies. I woke up to the gray, unforgiving light of dawn filtering through my cheap blinds. The storm of grief and shock from the night before had passed. In its place was a cold, hard calm. The kind of calm that comes after a forest fire has burned everything to the ground, leaving behind nothing but stark, clear truth. I was no longer a victim of circumstance. I was the survivor of a deliberate attack. I picked up my phone, my hand steady, and dialed Margaret Stevens. I've read the letter, I said, my voice devoid of the hesitation it held yesterday. How are you holding up? She asked, her voice laced with genuine concern. I'm ready, I said. Tell me what's next. There's one more piece to this puzzle your grandmother left, Margaret said. She was not just a loving woman, Emma. She was a brilliant strategist. She knew your parents believed they would inherit everything. And she knew they were, let's say, financially reckless. What do you mean? I asked, though a cold suspicion was already forming in my gut. For the past 6 months, since her funeral, my investigator has been documenting their expenditures. They started spending the moment they thought the coast was clear. They bought a brand new luxury SUV for $75,000. They paid for a complete gourmet kitchen remodel, another $50,000. They even bought your brother Marcus that new speedboat he wanted for his birthday, a tidy $35,000. A sound escaped my throat, something between a bitter laugh and a sob. I was eating instant noodles so I could afford my history textbook, and they were buying a boat. Your grandmother knew, Margaret confirmed, her voice dropping with what sounded like profound admiration. She wanted them to spend. She wanted them to live high on the hog, to rack up credit card debt, to believe they were untouchable. She let them dig their own financial graves. This inheritance isn't just a gift to you, Emma. It's a perfectly executed punishment for them. The will is ironclad. They have absolutely no legal recourse. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a person who has just been handed a perfectly weighted sword after a lifetime of being told they weren't even allowed to own a shield. I want to go see them, I said, my voice level. I want you to come with me. When? Margaret asked. Now, I replied. I'm not going there to fight. I'm going there to end it. When we pulled up to the house in Margaret's quiet, expensive sedan, the new $75,000 SUV was gleaming in the driveway like a trophy. The house I grew up in, a place I associated with quiet misery and the constant feeling of being in the way, now just looked like a monument to their boundless greed. I walked up the familiar stone path and rang the bell. Patricia opened the door, a look of surprise melting into one of sheer annoyance when she saw me. Emma. What on earth are you doing here? Her eyes darted to Margaret, standing silently beside me. And who's this? This is Margaret Stevens, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. She was Grandma Eleanora's lawyer. That combination of words was a magic spell. It conjured Richard, Olivia, and Marcus into the hallway behind her, their faces a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. They were all standing in the entryway, with a clear view of their brand-new, $50,000 kitchen. It was all stainless steel and gleaming quartz countertops. It was beautiful. And it made my blood run ice-cold. We need to have a conversation, I said, stepping past Patricia into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. Margaret followed, her briefcase a symbol of the power we now held. We stood there in the gleaming new kitchen, a tableau of a family about to be fractured. The air was thick with unspoken questions. What is this about? Patricia finally demanded, crossing her arms in her signature defensive pose. If you've come begging for money, you can turn right around and leave. Your grandmother made her wishes clear years ago. I just looked at her. For the first time in my life, I wasn't intimidated. I saw past the carefully constructed facade of the suburban matriarch and saw a small, deeply insecure woman, terrified of losing her grip. Actually, Margaret said, her voice cutting through the tension, we're here to discuss Eleanora's final will and testament. Richard let out a short, dismissive scoff. We've been through this. It's all taken care of. Is it? Margaret asked, raising a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. She opened her briefcase and produced the blue-bound document. Because according to this final, legally binding will, the entirety of Eleanora Caldwell's estate, her home, her investments, and the $3.5 million in her accounts, is to go to her granddaughter, Emma Caldwell. The silence that descended on the room was absolute. It was so profound you could hear the hum of the new refrigerator. It was the sound of a world breaking. Patricia was the first to snap. A harsh, ugly, disbelieving laugh tore from her throat. That's preposterous. She's adopted. She's not even a real Caldwell. This is a joke. We'll contest this. We'll drag you and this little nobody through court for years. I would strongly advise against that, Margaret said, her voice turning to ice. The will is ironclad. It was signed in the presence of 3 independent witnesses, all of whom have provided sworn affidavits as to Eleonora's sound state of mind. Furthermore, she left behind years of documentation, journals, and a personal letter explicitly detailing her reasoning. Any attempt to contest it would be frivolous, and frankly, financially ruinous for you. Richard, pale and trembling, finally found his voice. It was weak, pathetic. But, she's adopted, he repeated, looking at me, his eyes pleading for me to uphold the lie that had defined my life. I took a single step forward, and the gravitational center of the room shifted to me. I looked directly at the man I had called father for 24 years, the man who had stood by and watched my spirit be crushed day after day. My voice, when it came, was not the voice of a scared little girl. It was the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. No, I said, my words clear and sharp as breaking glass. I'm not. I'm Jennifer's daughter. I said her name. The name of the ghost they had tried to bury. The name of my real mother. The effect was devastating. Richard physically recoiled, stumbling back until he collapsed into one of his new, expensive kitchen chairs, burying his face in his hands with a choked sob. Patricia's face, already pale, twisted into a mask of pure, venomous rage. You little snake, she hissed, her voice shaking. How dare you speak that name in this house? Olivia and Marcus just stared, their jaws slack, their eyes darting between their crumbling parents and me, the stranger in the center of the wreckage. This is all a lie! Patricia shrieked, her composure shattering completely. We loved you. We took you in. We gave you everything. Everything? I asked, and this time a real, humorless laugh escaped my lips. You gave me leftovers. You gave me hand-me-downs. You gave me a childhood of feeling like I was a burden. I took a step closer. You want to talk about what you gave me? Let's talk about the science fair in 7th grade, Dad. Remember that? I had a chance to win, all I needed was a better kit. You promised you'd get it for me. Then Patricia decided Olivia needed new ballet shoes. And you just folded. That's what you gave me. A lifetime of folded promises. I turned to Patricia. And you. While I was working double shifts to pay my rent, you were enjoying this kitchen, weren't you? $50,000. And the SUV? $75,000. And a boat for Marcus. A boat! Did you ever once stop and think about the girl you claimed to have taken in? The chaos reached its peak. But then, through the noise, Olivia, the pampered golden child, ran to me, her face a mess of tears and confusion. Emma, please, she begged, grabbing my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You can't do this to us. We're family. You have to share the money. We'll be ruined. Dad will lose his job. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. I saw not a sister, but a stranger who had stood by and watched me suffer. I gently, deliberately, pulled my arm free. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The part of me that had craved their acceptance for so long had finally died. Family? I repeated, my voice quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. Show me, Olivia. Show me one picture on these walls where I'm standing with you. Show me one memory from a vacation I was on. You never wanted me to be your family. I looked at each of them one last time, at Patricia's sputtering rage, Richard's pathetic, sobbing form, and the stunned faces of my half-siblings. I spent my entire life trying to fit into a family that had no room for me. I don't need to anymore. Then, I turned my back on the wreckage, and with Margaret at my side, I walked out the front door and never looked back. The following months were a strange, surreal landscape of healing and reinvention. I moved into my grandmother's beautiful, quiet house. At first, it felt too big, too empty. I felt like an imposter rattling around in someone else's life. But slowly, it began to feel like home. One rainy Saturday, I ventured into the attic. In a dust-shrouded corner, I found it, a large, cedar-lined oak chest. With a creak of old hinges, I opened it. It was a time capsule. It was my mother's. Inside, I found photos of me as a baby, being held and kissed by a woman with my eyes and a radiant smile, Jennifer. I found a lock of my baby hair, tied with a blue ribbon. I found a small, worn teddy bear that sparked a flicker of a memory so faint it was like smoke. And underneath it all, I found them, dozens of birthday cards and Christmas presents, all addressed to me in my grandmother's hand, all marked with the cold, red stamp, "Return to sender." They had denied me even that. I sat on the dusty floorboards of the attic, surrounded by the ghosts of a love I'd never known, and I cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release. I enrolled in a business program at the state university. I was determined to be a worthy steward of the gift my grandmother had given me. I wanted to build something. The inevitable call came on a Tuesday morning. It was my father. He sounded like a different person, old, tired, defeated. He stumbled through an explanation about credit card debt, about the bank threatening foreclosure on the house. He asked, his voice cracking, if I could help them. Just a loan. I listened silently until he was finished. I took a deep breath, the silence stretching between us. "I'm sorry to hear that you're in that position," I said, my voice polite, but as distant as a star. "My lawyer can provide you with the contact information for several reputable financial counseling services. I suggest you call them." I hung up before he could reply. Patricia took a different approach. She started sending glossy Christmas cards, filled with saccharine, pre-printed messages about the power of forgiveness and the unbreakable bonds of family. I tossed them into the recycling bin, unopened. My real inheritance, I came to realize, wasn't the money. It was the truth. The truth that I wasn't unwanted. I wasn't unloved. I was the treasured child of one woman, the fiercely protected grandchild of another, and simply the unfortunate victim of a good man's weakness and a cruel woman's jealousy. Their rejection was never about my worth. It was always, only, about their own brokenness. Today, I stood in the lush, green garden behind my grandmother's house. The roses she had planted decades ago were in full, fragrant bloom. In my hands, I held the final blueprints for my new project, the Jennifer Caldwell Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing housing, scholarships, and mentorship to young women aging out of the foster care system. I was taking the pain of my own past and forging it into a future for others who knew what it felt like to be alone. I finally understood. I wasn't a weed that had sprouted in the wrong garden. I was a seed that had been planted in barren soil. And now, finally, I had been moved into the sun, free to grow. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's been a long and difficult journey, but I'm finally in a place of peace and purpose. I have to ask you, what would you have done in my shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories. It really helps the channel out. Thank you again.